Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are going to be discussing a topic that at first I thought, oh, maybe this topic isn't that interesting. But you know what? The more I got into it, it's really fascinating. But before we get into it, I will let Jamie say hello. How's it
Hello.
going?
Good. Glad to be here. Glad to be here. It's a good topic today, Paige. Thank you
Yeah.
for putting the work into this, prepping this episode as always.
Yeah, you bet. So today we are here to talk about self-pity, not just self-pity, but how it is poison to our systems. So you might find this a little bit surprising, but we're going to talk a little bit more about how and why self-pity is poison and how this behavior is deeply tied to the use of processed food. Did you know that self-pity creates a cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones in our body that can become as addictive as some narcotics? Self-pity acts like a drug, giving us the momentary pleasure of victimhood. This state can bring us comfort and even drive connection with others. But ultimately, self pity is a dysfunctional and harmful way of developing emotional bonds with ourselves or other people. And what's even worse, it can separate us from reality. Jamie, do you want to weigh in on your thoughts around that? How you feel that it can be addictive or even highly dangerous?
Yeah, for sure. I've seen what self-pity can do in my own life for sure. In the past, I had a practice of self-pity on a pretty regular basis, and it was something that was taught to me, not taught to me formally, but modeled for me growing up. And it was something that my family did on a regular basis. Um, Multiple members of the family. And it was just sort of something that I thought everyone did. And
Hmm.
that I just got stuck into that cycle of it. And we know that just about any addictive substance has an initial attraction, either some form of
Hmm.
euphoria or some relief from pain, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't
Hmm.
keep doing them.
Hmm.
But the thing about this cascade of hormones or any addictive substance, it takes over. It really corrodes freedom and judgment and creates dependency, and it doesn't just stop and stay at that point. It progresses.
Right.
That is the whole idea of needing a greater hit of whatever those substances or chemicals are to create the same effect. And you're always, quote unquote, chasing the high. But self-pity is sneaky because it comes with secondary gains.
Hmm.
And those secondary gains look like really pity. It looks like connection. It looks like sympathy. But it really is a status of victimhood.
Right.
And it can be a slippery slope for those who enjoy that type of attention because in order to get well, they have to be willing to give up that identity and take responsibility for healing.
Hmm.
And that means that they risk losing the familiar attention and sympathy that they crave. So it's that whole idea of taking personal responsibility. You might lose some of that notoriety or connection or personality that you're known for, but you have the opportunity to create a whole new version of yourself. Um, and that process forces us out of the past and into the present. So, Paige, I don't know about you, but I've known people that really don't have the motivation to progress out of that place of
Right.
self-pity and victimhood. It becomes their life, it becomes their main focus. It takes an energy on all its own. And they don't want to let go of the spotlight of victimhood because then they don't know who they'd be.
Mhm.
And it becomes that elixir for them to play the victim. And for me, once I understood the chemical cascade in my body, every time I had those thoughts of self-pity and victimhood, I learned that I became addicted in a way to that hormone and neurotransmitter cascade, the response in my body. And my body, yet again, became like a drugstore.
I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to smirk, but
Yeah,
it was
true.
irony. It's so true. It's
Mhm.
so true. You can create your own drugstore. I know we're working with someone uh now that has seems to be stuck in this place. And what I was thinking about is self-pity when you're connected to someone who's deep in the self-pity. You see they're harming themselves, but it's also affecting everybody else in the room. I am lucky my parents were not like that, so I didn't see a lot of that. It's more in adulthood working with other people where you see it. And you know what? Don't you think once you spot it, you can detect it more easily than after you've seen it in people?
Yes, that was true for me too. That was true for me. And what I really love this title of this episode because self-pity really is poison. It poisons us, it poisons everyone around us. And I'll tell you when I and I'm sure that I brought these outlooks years ago when I lived in this place around certain topics. I was very positive in some ways, but very negative and self-pitying in others. And what I've seen in folks who live in that place of self-pity, and it might not be all areas of their life, but certain areas, they will come in and they can suck the energy out of a room faster than a tornado. I mean,
The
really,
talent.
it is just unreal. Like you could
Uh-huh.
be riding a high of energy in the room, people very positive and lots of gratitude flowing. And this person who's steeped in self-pity will come in and just burst every balloon in there because he or she is trying to take everyone else down with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
It
No,
is, oh,
I agree with you. In fact, I think you were the brainchild behind this idea for this episode, if I remember correctly. And at first, when you said that, I'm like, meh. And then as we got into it, I'm like, oh, yeah, this
yeah.
is a bigger topic than I realized. So,
Mhm.
one of the things we know is that real food recovery, we include these addictive substances or processes as one of our branches of recovery. We avoid all addictions in order to keep ourselves safe. We understand there is a close tie with other addictions and how it can easily activate those that suffer from processed food addiction. We feel the same about caffeine, alcohol, gaming, gambling, pornography, shopping, etc. And self-pity is definitely one of those addictions we work on. Um, I agree that anything that takes us out of self or who we authentically are is a nuisance. It's a nuisance to our recovery and it's a huge distraction.
Mhm.
So that's why we were so purposeful in including these other addictive substances as something that you need to really be wary of because whether it's self-pity or whatever, it just drives you back to those same issues.
Agreed, agreed. And, it's interesting when I got into the rooms of 12-step rooms in my early recovery, they talked a lot about how living in self really was their terminology for self was that self-indulgence, self-pity, self-seeking
Mm-hmm.
place. It was a negative place. But in the recovery and spiritual world, the idea of self um many times is like that true self, the home, the spiritual self.
I love
It's
that.
it's a positive thing. So whenever I hear people talking about the word self, I have to just do a little translation and figure out which one they're talking about. Because in the 12-step world, if someone says, "Oh, you're stuck in self," that's a place we got to get out of quick.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of it quick because if you're stuck in self, all you do is spin in it,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't actually get to uh, look at things from another perspective or serve someone or
Mm-hmm.
connect with God or whatever that antidote is. But in the spiritual world, in the recovery world, outside of the 12-step rooms, you'll hear someone say, my true self, or I'm connecting with the spiritual part of me or my spirit or my home. That's a very positive thing.
Yeah.
So just something to think in mind, to keep in
Yeah.
mind. Some have said that self-pity is compassion that has been hijacked and corrupted. I like that very much. The problem becomes when there is a persistent focus on self. Then we begin to start hearing whisperings telling us that we are abandoned, alone, isolated, woe is me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and which is another favorite. Again, my background is not in alcoholism. It was really the food, but I have many friends that are in recovery from alcoholism, for many years sober and recovery. And they will often say that, they'll get into the poor me's and they'll, say, poor me, pour me another drink. And it's a natural progression. When they're in a place of
Right.
self-pity, it is just one of those next steps to their addiction.
Mhm.
Um, we if we look at these feelings, right, all these feelings can activate addiction, whether it's to processed foods, alcohol, drugs. we know that that kryptonite to isolation is connection, right? The opposite of isolation, the opposite of addiction, and seeking comfort is connection, which is why we say that connection really, again, is that antidote to get us out of the place of addiction. Nothing holds a grip on our addictions like feelings of isolation. Binging is most often carried out when we're alone. And for me, it
Mhm.
absolutely was. And no one
Mhm.
is watching. The only time that I binged with someone else was when I was with someone who was another addict around
Right.
food,
Doing the
or
same
another,
thing.
user of addictive foods. And then I would just, it was like, we both had this sort of secret agreement to eat as much as we wanted,
Yep.
however long we wanted.
Mhm.
I had a 15-year marriage like that,
Mhm.
unfortunately, where we had this sort of unspoken agreement that we would co-sign each other's
Mhm.
addictions. Um, and again, the last thing that someone with, who struggles with food or using food wants to have is a spotlight shining down on their behaviors. So, right.
Right.
So they're gonna do it in isolation
Mhm.
most often. And these acts are carried out at home, alone, usually at night. Again, that those feelings of darkness and isolation are I think most prevalent. And if you have family in the house, when most people in the house have gone to bed. Another favorite for me was, my binges would happen in the car, when driving home from work
Yeah.
or going out in the middle of the day. And that, of course, invites more negative feelings and sets us up for more negative behaviors. It really is a painful, miserable existence.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I agree. All true. Everything you said, just very profound. Also self-pity can breed resentment for those that have wronged us, whether those wrongs are real or imagined. Resentment then becomes the birth mother of spite and revenge and drives charity from our hearts. In recovery, we rely heavily on compassion in our everyday life. And when it eludes us, we are headed for trouble. Furthering the problem, self pity clears the ground for making excuses for self indulgence. The addiction tells us, go ahead, you deserve it. Just this one time. Life has been so unfair that morally you are justified. Then rationalization creeps its way in and begins to take over. And thus, we have once again entered this vicious cycle. And we work with people all the time who have to fight back against this. I've had a hard week. The kids have been rough. My spouse, is annoying. Work is challenging. And they will admit it's that self celebratory. I've made it through another week of this life and I deserve it. And so we work a lot with people at Real Food Recovery of how can we celebrate wins that are in ways that are more fulfilling and other than food seeking and getting out of changing the narrative, changing the story in your head, looking for gratitude, those types of things. So we are very familiar with that scenario.
Yeah, and it's really around, as one of our leaders, Shay says, it's really around the whole idea of identity shift. And for
Yeah.
me, years ago, living in that place of victimhood, I didn't know I was in a place of victimhood. I just thought I was doing life and living life and doing my thing, and I just thought I was really sad all the time. But I did have an identity of victimhood, and
Mhm.
my first entry into the recovery world, it was in the 12-step world, and that really did help me see how dangerous self-pity was, but I didn't understand that self-pity came with those addictive chemicals that we create in our body and in our brains. I didn't understand that until the last few years of my recovery. Again, I wasn't in a place of self-pity by that point, but I was like, well, of course, that's how I stayed stuck for so long.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating to me. But yeah, I think that you have to have an identity shift out of that place of victimhood and into a place of empowerment, or at least being empowered about what you can do in spite
Right.
of a really bad situation or
Right.
situations around you.
It's like you were saying about your body becomes a pharmacy. It's literally that's exactly what you're describing.
Totally.
It's so
Totally.
it's
And
hard to break out.
it is. And if our bodies are going to be a pharmacy to the bad, they're going to be a pharmacy to the good. So
Yeah.
what positive neurotransmitters and hormone cascades can we create from feelings of gratitude, from
Mhm.
feelings of peace, from feelings of love, from thoughts that generate these emotions? Um,
Mhm.
you and I have talked about this person. I don't know if we've talked about it in a podcast, but there's a woman that's in the health and well-being world, very prominent woman, lost a child he was very young. He wasn't even 11 years old
Mhm.
in some kind of accident. No, there's
Mhm.
not a lot of information about it.
Yeah.
Nor should there, right? Nor should there be, but some kind of accident. And so this
Mhm.
poor mom and dad lost their baby, their youngest. And, I just remember thinking, I can't, even imagine the kind of pain. But what was interesting was within a couple of weeks of losing, well, maybe it was a month total, but
Yeah.
within weeks of losing her son, this woman was back in the public eye,
Yeah.
talking about it,
Mhm.
and thanking people for their outpouring. It was an immense outpouring of love and grief for this family,
Yeah.
immense. And
Mhm.
this little boy was just a total light. And so he had touched a lot of lives, and his parents being in the public eye, he touched even more.
Mhm.
So this woman was able to articulate how she stays in gratitude and stays in a place of gratitude for all that she does have, not for what she doesn't. And she said, the grief for her um, came and went, like in waves. But she said she did her best to keep her head above water.
Yeah.
And the way she did that was holding on to the gratitude that she had. And she said, life is still very much worth living. And she said, I have wonderful things. And whenever I am underwater with the grief, I remember those things. And it keeps me, it gets me back up out of the waves. And I just remember thinking that was like that was a totally different mindset to me. It's the mindset that Viktor Frankl talks about in Man's Search for Meaning. It's the same
Mhm.
mindset that got that him as a Holocaust and concentration camp survivor.
Yeah.
It got him through that entire ordeal, um, by remembering that he had a choice of how he chose to look at his circumstances. And
Totally.
again, that was something that was very foreign to me until I was well into my 30s. It was just not modeled for me in my family of origin, and I was not running in circles of people who talked about it.
Yeah.
So once I realized that, I was like, wait, you don't have to have this perspective of negativity and carrying it around and self-harming myself with it. It just was a whole new mindset.
Can
So
I tell you something real fast
yeah.
before we move on? So my dad, when my parents both grew up on farms in Southern Illinois, and they got married early, like at 18, left the farms, and my dad got an engineering degree, and they had to move to New York. I was born there actually, and he was going to some technical school there for engineering, and he had a mentor there, and he went into his office, and my dad shook his hand, and he must have asked my dad, how you doing it? And my dad answered and then asked him, how are you? And he said, great, fantastic, never better. And they got into a discussion about that.
Mhm.
And so at this young age, I mean, my dad must have, I don't know if he was even 20 or around that age. He taught my dad that no matter what, you look someone in the eye when they say, how are you doing? And you say, fantastic, never better. And how it is washes over you, and you do take that on. It's such a choice. So no matter what, my dad said he learned that from a young age, and he is extraordinarily positive. I mean, the world could be falling down around, and he always looks on the bright side. There's always tomorrow, or
Yeah.
whatever he
Yeah.
says, and
Yeah.
is extraordinarily positive. But we
That
can
is
take those
fascinating.
moments,
Mhm.
those he was willing to listen and learn and take that moment, and that has stuck with him throughout his whole life. So he
Yeah.
is almost annoyingly positive.
That's huge. But he's built a life and rebuilt a life, right? In different circumstances in different cities.
Mhm.
He's done
Mhm.
that, over the years, right?
Mhm.
Raised a family with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. My father-in-law is unfortunately, again, not my family of origin did not have that mindset. But my father-in-law does. And it's like it's honestly like it's so alien to me that I think that there's something wrong with them. Because I'm like, why aren't you acknowledging how bad this is? This is not good. I just don't, it's like another language to me. It's like they're aliens on a different planet.
You need to
And
call 911.
right. And I remember my husband, and I, when we were first married, living together, and he said something about he doesn't like, he acknowledges what happened, but he doesn't get caught up in it. I'm like, how could you not get caught up in it? Like, it's so big. It's how could you not get caught up in what you're feeling? And he's like, I don't, what good does it do? And
Yeah,
I'm thinking, well, that is so out of touch. And that is so, and I don't know that it's out of touch.
right.
Maybe him not knowing what he's feeling, that's out of touch. But knowing what you're feeling, acknowledging it, and then moving on out of it, that's healthy.
That's spot on.
Exactly. So we have this 80-year-old living in our home with us, and he chooses to still work because he loves the work he does, and it's something I think that keeps him out of trouble, so to speak,
Good for him.
out of self. And so he goes to work, and this man, like today, he'll work 14 hours.
Oh,
He'll work 14 hours on his feet in a hot kitchen,
ooh,
and he will come in the door. And if I was still awake tonight, if I was still awake when he walked in the door, and I asked him, long day, how you feeling? Feeling great? It's always a good day at work.
agree.
That's his answer all the time.
That, you know what? Oftentimes I say when people are having a bad whatever, I'm like, get to work. Just
Yeah.
go to work.
Yeah.
It just pulls you out. It puts things back into perspective.
Yep. Absolutely. I learned that for me too. And again, I had to learn these things. Unfortunately, they were not taught to me.
Yeah.
At least not by my primary family of origin. They were taught by other people in my life
Hmm.
later. But
Hmm.
man, I just was not taught these things. So to have these examples in my life is wonderful. And again, I'll say, aren't you tired? You were like on your feet for 14 hours. And he's like, nope, body's a machine, got to use it. Like he just doesn't miss a beat.
No
Now,
excuses.
does he walk into his bedroom and we never see him again till the next morning when he has to leave? Yes. I'm sure he is exhausted, but he doesn't let it out of his mouth.
Good. Good for him.
Mhm. So where do we go? What do we do when life kicks us in the teeth? Most of us will experience self-pity throughout our lifetime, and although it can be a self-soothing mechanism that assists us in, again, accepting and changing our circumstances, that's the positive, right? Self-pity is not
Mhm.
meant to be dwelt in, it's meant to be sort of
Yeah.
a catalyst.
Very.
Sometimes it can stick to us like a leech psychologically, which is very true. How do we break out of this self-destructive cycle of self-sabotage? Well, we define self-sabotage here at RFR as knowing better but choosing not to do better.
Huge, huge statement.
So self-awareness is the first step. And if you're still listening, we applaud you because you're squarely entering self stage.
Yeah. So step two is to be kind to yourself. Self-pity is normal. It's a human trait and no one is perfect. We are naturally wired to the negative. So with a little bit of reframing, we can turn this around, especially as we practice this skill set. Oftentimes at the very heart of chronic self-pity is at least one deeply held mistaken belief about ourselves. This is a good time to take a look at our personal values and to see if we are living in alignment with our personal values.
Mm.
We know one thing that is so helpful is to focus on gratitude, as we have just been talking about. Even, we talked about, we gave all these stories, but even if you just keep a gratitude journal, if that's helpful, write in it every day. I know some people have a journal, they like write 3 things they're grateful for, and that may be all they journal for, but it does make a big impact on them. It's very effective in reprogramming your thought patterns. Literally, we learn to rewire our default settings in our brain. This does take practice, but super effective. Are you a journaler? Are
I
you?
am at certain times. Yep, I am at certain times. It's a tool in my toolkit. It's not a daily thing for me, only because I'm very verbal. So it's for me, it's prayer. It's talking with my inner family. It's talking with someone, you or someone that I love in my inner circle. That's more cathartic to me.
Mm.
And again, I think fostering any creative outlet is helpful.
Yeah.
It could be growing a houseplant, working on a scrapbook, painting, knitting, writing short stories, coloring, painting by numbers. This removes the attention and energy we place on ourselves, and it helps us redirect it to something other than ourselves.
Right.
But it also instills us with a sense of accomplishment. So hobbies were not a big thing for me growing up. And a few years ago, taught myself how to knit, and went to a few classes and learned a few things. Really loved it. I still do. And I've gone into some painting and some artwork and some other things that I really enjoy doing. How about you, Paige? Do you do any of these things?
Yeah, I like to think that I'm this scrapbook extraordinaire. I had a scrapbook for all my kids going through high school and college, even kind of up until they got married. And I also kept one for our family. But now, I mean, it's a lot of the grandkids, and there's just too much to keep up with. So I just slap those suckers in there, and move on. I mean, it's just but I used to do the stickers and cut out the frame, uh, uh, construction paper behind each picture, and yeah, I done with all those creative memories, I think is what it was when I first started. But yeah, now I just journal, label, date. I
Yeah.
might say a couple words, but
Do you
um
ever dig out your scrapbooks from the past and look at them?
yes, and I will tell you, my son, who used to make fun of me when I would want to take pictures, he's like, "Oh, mom, another picture." In high school, he's a real pain in the tuchus. Now, if he would bring someone over before
Mm.
he would married, he would like, "Hey, do you want to look at my scrapbook?" Because it's all of his high school accomplishments of athletics. First thing we'd do is we'd pull out the scrapbook of
How funny.
yeah, he played sports year round, so that scrapbook
That's
filled
hilarious.
with his athletic accomplishments, a little sucker.
That's hilarious.
And I say this is what my kids will fight over when I'm dead. They'll fight over the scrapbooks that they didn't want to cooperate with earlier on. But it does definitely take the focus off of self. And I enjoy knowing I'm leaving something for posterity. I journal once a week in my personal journal. I don't know if people will want that or not, but if they do, I do a lot of record keeping in there. And another thing that pulls us out of self-pity is to get out in nature, feel the sun on your face. Vitamin D actually helps to improve your mood and energy levels while decreasing depression all at the same time. So ensuring that you get enough sun exposure each day is a good way to fight self-pity. I do like exercising outside, but in Kansas, the temperatures preclude it a lot of the time. The summer is just scorching. It's so humid here. It literally, when you step outside, it takes your breath away. So we can be out in the fall and spring when the allergies aren't too bad. But Jamie, you are in an area a lot of your time that you can talk about being outdoors probably better than me. You have a pretty sweet setup. You want to talk about how being outside impacts you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of being outside as much as I can. Depends on where I am. If that, do you mean the sweet setup being back and forth between the two?
Yeah, well, being in Jersey for
Yeah.
being outdoors during
Yes.
the
Yes.
summer.
Yes. That is a huge benefit of being outside. Um, and it being up in Jersey, being living near the beach. And there's really, even outside of the beach area, if you can get out of that, of the shore towns, and get to other areas in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, there's so much beautiful nature up there.
Mhm.
This time of year, really spring through November, even sometimes early December, you can get out there
Mm.
where it's a little mild. It's mild. I find it to be, in the last few years, I find it to be milder winters than it has been in the past than it was
I,
growing up.
I think
I don't,
weather's
again,
changing.
yeah,
Same
yeah.
here in Kansas.
Really?
Although we did have a wicked winter with -20 for about
That's
10
true.
days. Other than that, it's real nice.
That's true. That's true. Well, and I think this was a El Nino year or La Nina year,
Mm.
so that could be. But um, in Houston, where I live the other half of the year, and I'm hoping to keep this going. We'll see. But again, you can get outside. They have like a week of winter, like maybe two, and then like a freeze here and there, and then
Yeah,
it goes back to, very mild, 40s and above, and it's very mild. But again, in the summer in Texas, I'm out. Like
right.
there's nothing here in the summer in Texas that,
Yeah, that's bad.
yeah, it's just, and I understandably everyone stays inside, and there's no, you can get outside very first thing in the morning, like it's still dark, like 5 a.m., or you can get outside like 8 or 9 o'clock at night to do exercise. But by that point, both those time zones, you're dealing with massive amounts of mosquitoes and bugs. So
Oh,
it's really like there's nothing redeeming about the summers here.
mm-mm.
So it's just that there's some trade-offs. So there's some
Yeah.
trade-offs. Um, and again, being outside, biking is a big thing for me. My husband and I both. Just getting outside to move in general. And I have two little dogs who hate the heat, like any little dog probably doesn't like the heat. They hate it. But in general, getting them outside is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. That makes total sense. When we had a dog, she really filled my life with so much love. She was literally like a child to me, and she loved getting outside for a walk, which brings up the next point of taking regular long walks. Exercise has been proven to boost the levels of endorphins in your brain, which are responsible for elevating your mood, plus a million other benefits. You may also like to consider joining a gym or investing in your own sports equipment if you prefer privacy. I do a little of both, and I love being able to switch back and forth. And I do like the gym. And one of the reasons I like going there is I'm seeing familiar faces when each time I go. I may not know anyone's name, but I'm comfortable enough to say hello to the regular people that are on your schedule that you end up seeing over and over. So I get that sense of connection when I'm there, and I'm able to say, hello to a friendly face or a few people that I might do a 30-second stop and chat. And I leave with a sense of accomplishment and belonging, which are both important to my psyche. So I get a nice hit of feel good neurotransmitters. Jamie, how does exercise affect you? Do you have a relationship between exercise and self-pity? Does it pull you out of
Oh
that
yeah,
place?
yeah. It pulls me out of self in general, negative side of self, and it puts me in the present moment. Um, and it puts me on a much happier track throughout the day. Another one that is helpful that we encourage in our real food recovery community is to practice spirituality. And it's not about religion, guys, but it's
Mhm.
about whatever form that spirituality practice looks like for you. It might be meditation, it might be prayer, it might be reading scriptures or other spiritual books. It might be walking in nature. It might involve going to church or a church or some kind of service. It might be listening to uplifting or spiritual based podcasts or audiobooks.
Mhm.
Spirituality helps us increase our ability to become self-aware. And it's this ability to catch ourselves in the act of having or the act of fulfilling our self-pity. That's how spirituality sort of intervenes in that process.
Mhm.
It's the opposite of victimhood and invites peace that really does overshadow the sorrows. Have you found that to be true for you?
Yeah, that was a great point. I love that. It's
Mm.
just you said the ability to catch yourself in the act of having these self-pitying thoughts. It precludes spirituality. So I love how spirituality is the opposite of victimhood. That's huge. So yes, oh gosh, totally. Yeah, I totally am into that. I've had a very big shift this year with going to compassion for those that have wronged me versus staying stuck in anger, frustration, or victimhood. It's really opened up the doors to peace and calm that I had never experienced before. I didn't realize I could get to that place, but it's a much better place to hang out in my head if
Yep.
I can go to compassion versus anger or frustration. And when I can find compassion for someone that's hurt me, then happiness is close at hand. For
Mhm.
example, if a family member has hurt me, I can say genuinely, I feel sorry for the relationship that they will miss out on with me because I'm a loyal friend. And it's sad that they will miss out on that support. And I truly mean it in a compassionate way. It has been a real game changer for me. all the negativity evaporates. It's just the tightness in my chest relaxes. It's this kind of flows into the next area we want to talk about, which
Mm.
involves focusing on this inner work, or in other words, asking ourselves, what do I really need in this moment? Truly need, and then listen to that inner voice for guidance and direction. It's a beautiful act of self love and can open a whole new world of thinking. And when we ask ourselves what we need, it feels like we are separating ourselves from the pain and we take on the ability to look within ourselves from an objective stance, an objective manner,
Mm.
taking a look at ourselves outside of ourselves, which that is the only way to have clarity, I think. And Jamie, you are very proficient with this type of work. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I just want to go back to the spirituality. It's the whole idea with spirituality that um, the idea that when we can put something else in the way of ourselves.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's the whole, for me, that's a huge benefit of spirituality. It, instead of focusing on me, I'm able to focus on, for me, it's a spiritual practice of God and seeking God and his will for me. And that gets me out of myself and puts my focus on him. And that's very, very helpful for me. Every single time, every single time.
Mhm.
When we think about the whole idea of connecting with, our inner selves, right? And those parts of us that have been hurt or just parts of us that have been neglected. That is a very helpful practice. It has been for me anyway. It's not always comfortable or easy. And I've found a lot of peace in doing that, and also asking, the spiritual presence that I call God, asking him for guidance there and how to love and reconnect with those parts that I've pushed away for so many years.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing we can do that gets us out of self or self-pity uh, is service to others.
Mhm.
And that's another branch of our recovery tree at Real Food Recovery. It's a huge, huge thing. For me, it was a game changer in recovery to serve others, to get out of self and serve. But it can look like volunteering. It can look like just, Paige, this is something that you do a lot. You serve your family.
Yeah.
And it can look like, for me, I absolutely, when I'm doing things I don't want to do for another person in my life, that's an act of service every time. Volunteering helps us put our lives into perspective. It encourages us to appreciate what we have even more. And volunteering, or service, it boosts our self-esteem, it boosts confidence and compassion. In short, if you get out of your own way, right, out of self-pity, and out of those spirals, you can serve. And more importantly, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. So the
Good
act of
point.
service gets me out of that place of self.
That's so, oh man, that was so well said. And I cannot tell you how much I agree with you on everything you said. And service to others, oh, huge, huge key. Never do you feel better or more fulfilled than when you take on the concerns of others. It is the happiest you will ever feel. It's powerful, powerful stuff, which is why we were so purposeful in including it as part of our recovery program. I think it's so valuable. Let me just say, at first, when we were developing our branches, and Jamie brought this in, is we need to have this as one of our branches. I wasn't clear at first, the connection, but the more we got into it and talked about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this has got to be in there. I think it's so valuable in inviting self-worth and feelings of purpose and belonging in this world. I think random acts of kindness is right up there as well. So a
Yeah.
couple more points to bring out that you might find surprising is trying to minimize your environment. That one really surprised me. Interestingly, cluttered and messy environments contribute to paranoia, hoarding tendencies, anxiety, and depression. By
Mhm.
simplifying your environment, you may find that your psychological and emotional welfare is significantly increased. I know for me, I'm a clean freak and I get very nervous in clutter. I can't think straight, and I'm going to let Jamie speak about herself on this one, but I've seen how she lives, so, and it's pretty impressive. So I think I know what her answer is. What do you want to say about that, Jen?
That part was passed down to me in all ways from all areas of my family of origin. That
Interesting.
to, to unclutter, to stay uncluttered and to get into a place of cleanliness. And yeah, that's easy. One thing I want to go back to on that you mentioned, Paige, and I know the way that you use this word. You talked about never do we feel better or more fulfilled than when we take on the concerns of others.
Yeah.
Paige, that word you're using means not so much. Some people might view it as us taking on the concerns, the literal emotional concerns of others. That's not what Paige means. What Paige means is serving others in a way that accentuates and helps them out, or gives, adds life and adds connection to someone's life. It's not taking on their emotional concerns, or that codependent sort of
Oh, yeah,
worry
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah,
them.
yeah.
So I just want to clarify,
Yeah.
Paige, what she, when she uses that word, that term concerns, it's really
Uh,
what people are doing and
yeah.
need to be done.
Yeah. Finding out what's ailing you. How can I help you, buddy? What can I do
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
help buoy you up a little bit?
Yeah. But
And
growing up where I did, and this is why Paige and I we bring both these different perspectives. Growing up where I did, when somebody said, "Oh, you're taking on a concern of others," it means their concerns, their worries.
uh,
So yeah, so that's what I want to, for anyone who might be listening from the Northeast, there's a little bit of a colloquialism there. We just want to
yeah,
clarify that.
it's
Paige does an excellent job of making sure that, and that's something I have had to learn in recovery, of not taking on other people's emotions, but serving them and then sort of detaching from the outcome.
that sentence very well said.
Mhm. Um, so when I think about the last one that we're going to talk about, I find this very interesting, and it is to seek inspirational words and thoughts. The internet is overflowing with a lot of uplifting memes. Isn't that interesting? That's a glass half full statement, right? It
Yeah.
is. It is overflowing with a lot of uplifting memes,
Yeah.
and it's also overflowing with a lot of the opposite. But these quotes, these mantras, these affirmations, these uplifting visuals and words are everywhere. And you might ask, why do we see these inspiring quotes everywhere? It's because I think the human spirit is conditioned to look for them and to be uplifted by them.
Mhm.
I think we're very visual creatures, and we're very, we love the idea of being lifted up, right? Our spirits getting lifted up. And we are deeply affected by the words of others. And sometimes we find a quote that speaks to the deepest parts of our souls, a quote that changes us and revolutionizes the way we see things, and we can really lift us out of a dark place. Um, and why not create a collection of your own inspirational quotes? Which again could be another creative outlet for you. It could be something to do. I have in my notes app on my phone, I have a whole huge long list of affirmations that I keep and I add to and I look at, and I love connecting with. You can create a themed board, or on something on Pinterest to keep them organized. One of the ones that Paige put in here: laugh at yourself and at life. So again, it's the whole idea that not in the spirit or derision of whining, of self-pity, but as a remedy or miracle drug.
Mm.
Very,
Is
very
there
true.
anything better than having a good chuckle at yourself
Uh,
or life?
yeah, I don't think so. I
Yeah,
don't think so.
very healing.
Mhm.
So I agree with that so much. And what we have learned about feeling sorry for yourself is it's normal. But oftentimes this habit can cause us to avoid taking personal responsibility and bypass taking action. That's the whole, if out of this whole podcast, that
Yep.
is the whole point of self-pity. It keeps you from taking action and personal responsibility. You need to do that in order to progress out of that. Self-pity can also be a false substitute for love from
Mhm.
others, but by learning how to practice self-care and adjust your mindset, you can create a life environment that nourishes you and supports you in the deepest way.
Very true. If you discover that you have struggled or are struggling with this issue, just be kind to yourself. It's something that is it can be heavy, it can be overwhelming. I remember feeling a lot of shame when I realized this. Understand that self-pity is really a maladaptive coping mechanism, much like us using addictive foods for comfort.
Mhm.
But it's one that you can remove from your life with time and patience and some self-awareness. For me, once I saw it and I saw that place of self-pity, and I saw that if I was heading back into it, I would stop myself and pull myself out of it. For more information on what we do to help others around this at Real Food Recovery, you can find us at realfoodrecoveryforyou.com, and the link to our site is in the show notes below. So let's go ahead, and we've got a couple listener questions here. First question comes in. I hear you saying self-pity is a negative thing, but life has dealt me some really tough blows, and it's hard not to feel sorry for myself. I think it's unrealistic to expect that of me, and I think it is normal. I'm guessing they mean normal to be in self-pity.
Right.
I'm not sure what you could say to make me feel differently. So first of all, life has dealt many times. By the time you're in your middle age, life has dealt you some hard blows. That's just life on life's terms. It's not a fun place for any of us, but I think it gives us all a lot of self-compassion and a lot of compassion for others, because if we've suffered, others have suffered, or they're in a place of suffering and they need our compassion. So I really believe that suffering kind of opens us up to connection and compassion.
Yeah.
So that's a roundabout way of saying, what if you found gratitude for the things that challenged you? Paige and I both have had many, many bad hands dealt to us. But we choose to look at things differently in our life, and to not let those things weigh us down. And it's really, really important.
Jamie, if you finish.
So I think it's really important to remember that this is a place of connection, and this is a place of healing for you, because this test can really become, or the tests you've lived through can really become a testimony.
Oh, I like that.
And I cannot take credit for it. I've heard this in my spiritual circles for a while, but the tests that we live through become our testimony to help someone else.
Beautiful.
It is absolutely critical to understand that, and to know that everything happens to us is happening for us.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. We have one last listener question. If self-pity is really, if self-pity is really that bad, I mean, let me have a moment. I deserve a little bit of poor me time, because I get it. Yes, it really is that bad. Like any negative emotion, it can become toxic and take over your life if left to spiral out of control. When we hang out in self-pity, we are letting our inner child run the show. The loving adult part of us wants to care for our hurts and find the best path forward to this big, beautiful life, for which you can't experience if you're stuck in the throes of self-sorrow. So your world becomes very small when you only focus on yourself. And when you are in this state, you miss out on all the wonderful service opportunities that come from being an emotionally healthy adult. So be a do-gooder and expand your world. It gives you a greater sense of belonging. And
Yes.
that is where we end it today. Great episode. I really enjoyed diving a little bit deeper into this topic. And I'm going to say one more time, like Jamie said, if you want to know more about Real Food Recovery, you can find us at realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we hope to see you there. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.